Rundown 4, the rundown known for introducing optional objectives to GTFO. 12 total levels, and every single one of them has at least one optional objective in it. Some of these levels were designed quite well, and the optionals felt like they were integrated nicely. However, some of the other levels, they didn't quite hit that mark of perfection. Today's level, Alternate R4D2, is, in my opinion, the best prisoner efficiency level in all of Rundown 4. But it is also one of the most difficult ones to complete. And you all are about to find out why. Hello everyone, Professor Scaler here, and welcome to the Alternate R4D2 level guide. As always, we're starting off with your loadout, and this time around, I recommend you bring along with you a bio tracker, a mine deployer, a C-foam launcher, and a burst sentry. When it comes to the bio tracker, I like taking this as there are shadow type enemies in both the secondary and the overload sectors, so it helps out there a bit. And even for main objective only runs, I like to bring it with me as we're going to be mining and C-foaming doors a lot for many of the alarms we have to deal with. So much to the point where we're going to be re-C-foaming door over and over and over again, and in order to know which door we actually need to C-foam out of the potential 3 that enemies might take to get to us, we're going to want to have a bio tracker. That way, bio tracker person tags the enemies, the C-foam launcher person knows which door they have to go to, and they can get over to it and C-foam it before the enemies actually break it down. As for the mine deploy and C-foam launcher, well, you just heard me say it, we're going to be using them a lot throughout the entirety of this level, so I would recommend that all the tool refill you find, and I do mean quite literally all of it, put it into the mine deployer and the C-foam launcher. And even with pretty much all the tool refill in the level, you're more than likely not going to be able to perma C-foam the doors for every single alarm from start to finish. But it will get you incredibly far, which is really good because it will conserve a lot of ammunition and a lot of HP for the final bit of the level where we can't really rely on our tools quite as much. And last but not least, when it comes to that burst sentry, we're going to be using this for probably the first half of the level, as some of the first alarm doors we're dealing with, we're not going to be using mines and C-foam all that much. Or at least it'll be like that for the main objective route itself. So having a sentry just to shoot down some enemies and make so we don't have to consume quite as much ammunition is pretty nice. And if we manage to get all the way to the end of the level and we still have a little bit of ammunition left on that sentry, it can help us out on extraction by defending against the shadows and the chargers that will be coming after us. Hence why I actually prefer a burst sentry, because I find auto and shotgun don't really work all that well for this level, and even though sniper sentry isn't all that bad, when it comes to dealing with shadows, it's a little bit because even with biotracker symbiosis, it can't really shoot a whole lot before the tags disappear, and the sentry just goes back to standby mode since it can't do anything without biotracker symbiosis. Burst sentries though, with a high rate of fire, can actually do a little bit more work, and I find are a bit more efficient. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to clear a path all the way to zone 102, and you and your teammates are going to be starting off inside zone 91. In here, there will never be any enemies nor any resources for you to collect, but there will be your very first bulkhead key, as well as the door control and doors to your main, secondary, and overload sectors. So if you are somebody who is interested in only the main objective portion of this guide, you're going to want to jump to the time that you can see on screen, and there we will talk about the security door to zone 92 and how we can make our way all the way to the very end of the level. As for everybody else though, we're going to be doing that overload scan and then heading north to the bulkhead door to zone 710, as we need to take care of the overload objective before the secondary one. Now, when it comes to the overload bulkhead door to zone 710, we're going to have to deal with a class 3 surge alarm. And as you can see with this map overlay, this surge alarm is actually a little bit weird. Not only do enemies spawn 2 rooms away from us, but they also spawn 3 rooms away from us. So these 2 doors here, I recommend you shut and C-foam both of them, but only mine this door here, as this is a bigger one, so more enemies will be able to pile up against it and actually explode to that mine. As for the 3 doors that lead into your room, the 2 northern ones you could just leave shut, and the southern one you can leave open and then have your sentry somewhere near it on the outside, facing down towards the corridor they'll be coming from. If you get lucky, enemies will spawn in both rooms at the same time, which means they'll alternate hits on the doors, which will make it so they take a whole lot longer to actually break one of them down, giving you and the team so much more time to work on the scans and get them done before a single enemy steps foot into your room. Once everything is set up though, activate the alarm, get to work on the scans, and once everything has been taken care of, you can pack up your sentry and then head into zone 710. Inside of there, you're going to see that your overall objective is to retrieve a cargo crate from inside of the zone and bring it with you all the way to extraction. But in order to get to it, we're going to have to go throughout pretty much the entirety of the zone, which will be covered in pitch black darkness, and the only type of enemies you can expect to see in here would be spitters, shadow strikers, and I believe usually 2 shadow scouts. So make your way through here bit by bit, dealing with every single one of the enemies and clearing them all out, being a little bit cautious of the spitters, and also just looking around for resources as well as your second bulkhead key. Although when it comes to the resources, I would recommend the med packs and ammo packs, just leave them behind as we will be returning to here later in the level, but the tool refill you might as well grab with you so we'll have enough C-foam for later on. Then once you got all the resources and the bulkhead key and you know where that cargo is, you're going to want to leave. Don't leave with the cargo though, because the moment you pick it up, it's going to initiate an error alarm that will spawn in 3 shadow strikers roughly every 10 seconds. So we're going to want to actually complete the entirety of the rest of the level, then we'll come back, pick up the cargo, and take it with us to extraction. So once everything is done in here, head back out to Zone 91, plug your bulkhead key into the door control, do the secondary scan, and that will unlock the security door down to the south to Zone 345. That door is just simply going to be a full team scan, so finish the scan and head right on inside. And upon entering into the secondary sector, you're going to see that your secondary objective is to repower the generator cluster, which is always going to be located inside Zone 346. And you're going to need a total of 2 power cells in order to get this thing back online. So starting off inside Zone 345, there will be some sleeping chargers as well as a few resources to collect, but nothing too terribly special. There'll also be a security door to Zone 350, but this is currently under lockdown and you won't be able to open it up until after you have completed the generator cluster itself. However, there is another security door in here to Zone 346, so once you finish everything in here, go to that security door, and as you'll be able to tell, it is a blood door, so place a mine on it, open it up, and fall back. I believe this blood door will spawn in nothing but chargers and maybe a few hybrids, but there can also be a fair amount of enemies attached to the first room behind the blood door that might wake up. But thankfully, you've got a really nice funnel way with that staircase, so you and your teammates could just sit there and wait for the enemies to come to you. Once everything is dead, head into Zone 346, and in there you'll be able to find your generator cluster as well as a few resources here and there. And throughout the zone, you'll be able to find a total of 3 different security doors. One to Zone 347, one to 348, and one to 349. But before you start opening up any of these doors, you need to hop onto a terminal and query where your 2 power cells are, as only 2 of these 3 zones will have them in there. And once you know that, just go to either one of the 2 you have to go into, place a mine on it, as every single one of these security doors are blood doors, and then when you open it up, I recommend you fall back quickly, because these blood doors can spawn in a variety of different things. I believe they can spawn in regular shadows, they can spawn in chargers or hybrids, but the more terrifying thing is the room that they're usually attached to, because 2 of these 3 blood doors are attached to very, very big rooms. And these zones all consist of pretty much the same thing. Pitch black darkness, shadow strikers, regular strikers and shooters, giant chargers, as well as scouts, both normal and shadow scouts. So there's a good chance that if you stay near that blood door when you open it up and shoot there, you're going to wake up a ton of enemies, and the last thing you want is to wake up 1 or possibly even 2 scouts, as well as about 20 other enemies who are naturally sleeping inside of the room. So as soon as you open up the blood door, run away to a different side room. That way there is a much smaller chance of anything screaming and waking up the entirety of the first room. And once everything is dead, you can then head into the zone and start looking around. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, all 3 of these zones are incredibly similar to each other. They are covered in pitch black darkness, a lot of dangerous enemies in them, but there will be plenty of resources for you to collect, as well as some fog repellers, which I do highly recommend you grab as many of these as you can get. And you'll also be able to find a power cell. So go throughout the entire zone, either stealthily dealing with enemies or just simply sneaking past them. And once you have all the resources and the power cell from the first zone you went into, you can then go back into the generator cluster room, plug the first power cell in, as it's not really going to do anything whatsoever. And then you could go into the other zone and just do the same thing. Mine the blood door, open it up, fall back a bit, deal with all the enemies, go into the zone, grab resources, grab power cell and everything from in here. And then once you have literally everything, go back into the generator cluster room, but don't plug in the second power cell quite yet. Because once you do, it's going to do the typical generator cluster thing where the lights are going to go out, they'll come back on, and a full team scan will appear. And when that full team scan appears, an alarm is going to initiate. The more important thing though is that once you are done with the scan, it sort of initiates a soft 30 to 35 minute time limit, because from this point on, infectious fog is going to slowly start filling up the level. And if you don't get out within 30 to 35 minutes of this point, that infectious fog is going to rise up enough to the point where it's going to be a pretty big issue in many areas you have to go through. So speed is key. You need to move as quickly as you can from this point on without being too reckless, of course. So you're going to want to make sure you grab all the resources, heal people up, refill ammunition, hold on to those 2 refills as those are incredibly important. And once everybody's good to go, plug the second power cell in, do the full team scan, and then you can either just simply kill the enemies after you finish the scan as they come to you, or if you want to, you could just simply run back into zone 345, go to the side where you'll find the security door to zone 350, and open it up. 3 people can stay outside and defend against the enemies from the generator cluster, while 1 person runs in and looks for the 3rd and final bulkhead key. As that zone, even though it's a very big room, will never consist of any enemies, and it will only have the bulkhead key, no other resources at all. So go in, get the key, and as soon as you got it, just run back out, go into zone 91 and head over to the bulkhead door control, plug it in, and then do the scan for the main objective. That will unlock the security door to zone 92, and at this point we could continue on with the rest of the main objective. But before we start talking about all that, let's take a little breather here and meet up with the people who are skipping ahead to this moment. Alrighty, so welcome back to those of you who skipped ahead to this moment. We are now continuing on with the rest of the main objective, starting off with that security door to zone 92, which is going to have a class 2 cluster alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, if you're doing a prisoner efficiency run, there are a few different spawn locations for these enemies. And all you're really going to want to do is just make sure every single one of the highlight doors that are still preserved, you shut, and that's it. Don't even bother mining or C-filming anything. We're just going to simply shut the doors and keep on moving. Those of you doing a main objective only run though, you just simply have the enemy spawn from the west. So I would say this door right here, go on ahead, shut, mine, and C-film it. And then the 3 doors that lead into your room, you could either just shut them to buy your extra time, or you can leave them open and have a sentry near one of them, do a little bit of a funnel strategy. It's completely up to you and your team. It's only a class 2 cluster, so it's not that big of a deal. Once you finish this alarm though, I would recommend that you either deal with all the enemies if they are right there in your face, or if they're still fairly far away from you, just open up the security door and rush into zone 92. Then just go through the back end of it, sort of like you can see in the background footage, and when you get to this big door, open it up, run through, and then place your sentry down behind you facing towards the direction enemies will be coming from, and then go to the far eastern side and quickly activate the security door to zone 93, which will have a class 3 cluster alarm tied to it. As you can see with the map overlay, there's only 1 possible spawn location for enemies due to an invisible room divider, and because we're leaving that door open with a sentry there, all the enemies are going to funnel in through that room. We don't need to leave the door open to actually funnel enemies in through this way. They'll always take this route, but I want to save this door for later on in the level for the prisoner efficiency run people, so that's why we're leaving it open here. Once you finish this alarm though, you're going to want to make sure you clear out every single one of the enemies and then take a little bit of time to look around in here, as there will be some resources inside zone 92, and we want to grab those before we continue further into the level. Once we have all of that though, we can open up the security door zone 93 and head in there. And inside zone 93, there will never be any resources for us to collect, but there will be a single scout patrolling about, as well as a few regular strikers and shooters. So go throughout every single one of the 3 rooms, dealing with every single one of the enemies, and then once they're all dead, you can head to the far eastern side where you find a security door to zone 94. This door is going to have a class 4 cluster alarm tied to it, and as you can see with the map overlay, once again, only 1 possible spawn location for enemies, and they're always going to go in through this door to get into your room. And I recommend that those of you doing a prisoner efficiency run, leave that door open and place your sentry somewhere near it to shoot at the enemies as they approach it. That way we can once again preserve that door for the ending of the level. Once you've got everything set up, activate the alarm, get to work on the scans, and once all done, deal with every single one of the enemies before opening up the door. Now, you may have noticed that there was another security door on the northern side. That one takes you to zone 95. And those of you who are doing a main objective only run, feel free to head into there after you finish this alarm, as that security door just simply has a full team scan tied to it, and inside the zone you can expect to see, I believe, usually 2 regular scouts, a fair amount of giant strikers, and there'll also be some resources and a power cell that you can use to unlock a security door later down the road. Prisoner efficiency people though, completely ignore it. Going in there is not worth it, as yes, the resources are nice, but you're going to waste a lot of time trying to make your way through that zone. As for zone 94 itself, in here there will be another scout patrolling about, even more enemies to kill, and there will be resources to collect, so use the terminal in the very first room to ping the location of them if you're having a hard time finding any of the resources, and just make your way throughout here. In the southeast corner of the zone, you'll be able to find a security door to zone 96, and you'll actually also be able to find a security door to zone 97 very close to it. However, that security door to zone 97 requires us to plug a power cell into the nearby generator, which we're not going to have on a PE run, so we completely ignore it. Those of you doing a main objective only run, you could plug your power cell into here, or you could save it for a security door later down the road. As for Zone 97 itself, I don't really like ever going into here, even if I do just a main objective only run, because tied to that security door is a Class 3 surge alarm, and since it's in the same room as the other security door, which has a Class 5 cluster alarm tied to it, any door we could use for one alarm would also be used for the other one, so it's a little bit of an annoying setup. But inside of Zone 97, you'll be able to find more resources, you'll be able to find a fog turbine, as well as chargers and a few scouts patrolling about, so a little bit of a dangerous area, but you do get a fair amount of resources and a fog turbine. Although that fog turbine is almost next to useless for those of you doing a main objective only run, and for people doing the prisoner efficiency run, it's not really worth it. Even if we do have infectious fog filling up the level, I wouldn't recommend it. But going back on track, once you've taken care of everything inside Zone 94, you clear out every single one of the rooms, you're going to want to set up your defenses. As I mentioned, there's a Class 5 cluster alarm tied to the security door to Zone 96. And as you can see with this map overlay, there are two different locations they could possibly spawn from. If they spawn from the west, there are two different routes that they could take, so make sure every single one of those doors are shut, and then these two doors that lead into your room are mined. Don't bother seafoaming these yet, as you don't know which route they're going to take. Just do the full team scan, and then once a biotracker person tags the enemies, first with the seafoam launcher, you can run over to whichever door they are going to go for and quickly seafoam it. As for the northern enemies, they can only ever go through these two doors, so just shut both of them, and then mine this door right here. And again, you don't need to seafoam it quite yet, as you can very quickly run over there and get that seafoamed before they break it down. During this alarm, because all the enemies spawning in are chargers and they are more resilient than regular strikers or shooters, I recommend that the seafoam launcher person just keep seafoaming the door over and over and over again until your teammates give you a call and let you know, hey, we're on the 5th set of scans, you can stop seafoaming the door and quickly come over and help us finish them up. If you time it properly, the door will break down and most, if not every single one of the enemies will be killed off by the mine. If anything survives, you and your teammates just simply clean it up, and once everything is dead, pick up any mines that did not go off and head into Zone 96. Inside of Zone 96, you're going to be able to find more resources, a single scout patrolling about, and even more enemies to kill, and the very last room of the zone will almost always have fog in it, no matter how fast you're moving through the level. So go throughout the entire area, grab resources and everything, especially that 24 and ammunition. Those are very important to get. And once you've gotten everything from it, you can head to the far eastern side, use some fog repellers so you can get through the fog safely without gaining infection. And over there, you'll find a security door to Zone 98. This security door, though, is going to have a Class 6 cluster alarm tied to it. And as you can see with the map overlay, there's only one possible location enemies can spawn from. And again, it's going to be chargers. So I recommend that you shut both of these doors, seafoam both of them, but only mine the one that leads directly into your room. Then the person with the seafoam launcher can do the full team scan with their teammates and maybe even one set of cluster scans real quick. Then they can run over to the western side and just keep seafoaming that door over and over again as the enemies are slowly chipping away at all that seafoam. Then, just like the previous alarm, once your teammates get onto the final set of scans, they give you a call up, let you know, and you just leave the door and quickly run back over and join up with them, finish the scans, and then you can have one person stay behind just to deal with any of the chargers who might have survived after the door breaks and the mine goes off. Inside of Zone 98, again, familiar trend, you'll be able to find more resources, another scout patrolling about, and even more strikers and shooters to kill, as well as a generator that'll give you access to the security door to Zone 99. Now, if you're doing a main objective only run and you didn't go through Zone 97 earlier, you could head into here. However, the security door is going to have a Class 4 mixed alarm tied to it, and inside of the zone, you can expect to see 2 scouts. It's going to be pitch black darkness, and I think a fair amount of the enemies in there sleeping are going to be chargers, so it's a little bit of a nasty zone. I find this one to be better to go into than the Class 3 surge alarm zone, but again, I think I've only ever had one run in my life I've actually gone through here, so yeah, take what I say with a grain of salt. We'll show a map overlay for that alarm in a moment here, by the way, because somewhere else in the zone we can also find a security door to Zone 100, which is where we have to go to continue on with the rest of the main objective. However, that security door is going to have a Class 7 cluster alarm tied to it, and as you can see at the map overlay for this alarm, there are 2 different locations enemies can spawn from. So all the doors I've highlighted, I recommend you shut every single one of them, and then these 2 doors that lead into your room, place a mine on each of them, but don't bother seafoaming a single door yet until you know which direction they are coming from. Then once you know, you can just keep seafoaming the door over and over again and do your best to make sure it doesn't break down, as this is a very tiny room and you don't need a horde of chargers getting into the area with you. Thankfully, because it is a small room, you can actually help your teammates out with the scans while keeping the door seafoamed. And for those of you who actually do want to go into Zone 99, your map overlay just looks like this. It's not that complicated. There's only one location enemies can spawn from. Again, it's going to be charger type enemies though. But since both of these doors right here are needed for that class 7 cluster alarm, just leave these 2 doors open. That way you can preserve them for the much more difficult alarm. Continuing further on into the level though, once you head inside zone 100, from this point on there will not be any more resources. Zone 100, 101, and 102 do not have a single resource pack in them. However, inside zone 100 there will be a few enemies, specifically some sleeping giant chargers. Those are actually the only type of enemies you can find in this zone. And I would recommend that since you've been conserving a ton of ammunition with this whole C4 mine strategy, just shoot your way through them, and once they're all dead, you just keep making your way throughout the zone. Once you get to the far eastern side of it, you'll be able to find the security door to zone 101, and as you could probably already have guessed, this security door is going to have an alarm tied to it, specifically a class 8 cluster alarm. And as you can see with the map overlay, there are 3 different locations enemies can spawn from. If they spawn from the north or the south, they have 2 different doors they have to go through to get into your room. If they spawn from the west though, because of an invisible room divider, they only have to go through 1 door. So what I recommend you do is shut, mine, and seafoam this door right here, the western one, and then the northern and southern one that lead into your room, place a mine on each of them, but do not seafoam them yet, as you will have plenty of time to run over to one of those 2 doors and seafoam it after you do the initial full team scan with your teammates. So do the scan, biotracker person, tag the enemies, and then seafoam the door they're trying to take for as long as you possibly can. More than likely, you're not going to have enough seafoam to keep it shut for the entirety of this alarm, but that's perfectly fine. We're just simply buying you and your teammates a little bit of extra time, and then once you're out of seafoam, you're just going to have to hold out for a bit. You should have plenty of HP and ammunition, and potentially even some sentry ammo at this point, so you can utilize all of it. And for those of you doing a prisoner efficiency run, another thing to take note of is that there's a good chance that this room is going to be filled with a little bit of infectious fog. However, if you go into that middle catwalk and just throw a fog repeller right down smack dab in the middle of it, you'll pretty much clear out the entirety of the area where the scans can go, so you don't have to worry about infectious fog whatsoever. Although, because this is a fairly long alarm, you might have to replace that fog repeller halfway through to ensure that you won't gain any infection all the way through it. But assuming you can survive this alarm, you get every single one of the scans done, which there is a full team scan at the very end, so everybody has to stay alive, you can then just clear any of the enemies that are still left alive, and once they're all dead, you can open up the security door to zone 101. In there, you're only ever going to find one enemy who will be right there on the other side of the door, and that is going to be a sleeping tank. So what I recommend you do is have 2 people go into the room and sneak up behind him while the other 2 people stay out by the security door, and then once you're good to go, start shooting him and deal with him as quickly as you can. Once he turns and he's looking at you, just quickly get behind cover so you don't get hit by him, while the other people shoot him from behind and start popping those tumors. Once he is dead, if you're doing a main objective only run, you're actually pretty much done with a level. You head to the far eastern side where you'll find a security door to zone 102, which doesn't even have a scan tied to it, and once you open up the door and step foot into the room, your extraction scan is going to appear, but it is also going to initiate a charger extract alarm. However, it's not too terribly difficult to defend against this. From my experience, the chargers don't really spawn in giant waves, so as long as you still have some ammunition or maybe even a little bit of ammo in your sentry, you just simply hold down extraction for a bit and wait for the scan to get to 100%. But of course, if you're doing a prisoner efficiency run, you can't do that yet, as you need to head all the way back to the beginning of the level and grab that cargo from the overload sector. And as I mentioned earlier, once you pick it up, it initiates an error alarm that spawns in 3 shadows roughly every 10 seconds, which is pretty darn quick. So somebody on the team is going to pick it up, ideally not the biotracker person, and everybody else, you're going to protect them. Now, if you left resources behind like I recommended, you will have some ammunition and HP that you can quickly pick up. So resupply, and once everybody's good to go, pick it up and start making your way out. The beginning part of it is going to be the hardest, as the waves of shadows are pretty much only ever going to spawn in front of you, so you're just going to have to blast your way through them over and over again. Biotracker person, make sure you're being vocal when the biotracker's on cooldown, so if you can't tag enemies, you can at least give callouts, and just do your absolute best to survive. As you start making your way through, you'll be able to shut some of those doors behind you that I told you to preserve earlier, which will build some distance between you and the shadows, and it'll really go one of 2 ways. Either you're going to get lucky and pretty much every single wave is going to keep spawning from behind you, in which case it'll be a cakewalk to extraction, as you don't have to blast your way through anything and you'll build plenty of distance between you and them because of the doors. Or you're going to get unlucky, sort of like my group did in the background footage, where the waves just keep spawning in front of us over and over and over again, which results in us having to kill so many enemies and losing a lot of our resources. You're going to gain a lot of infection all the way to extraction, but it's not going to deplete your HP that quickly, so it's not too big of a deal. And eventually you'll make it all the way back to the far eastern side of the level, back to that security door to zone 102. Once you get near it, just simply one person run up ahead and open up that door, and you just have to drop the cargo onto extraction, then just throw some fog repellers in the room if the fog is high enough to start becoming an issue, and just hold out here for a little bit. Since it is an item extraction, having more than one person on the scan isn't going to make it go by any faster, so if I can, I usually like to have 2 people stay in the previous room just defending there, as it'll push the spawns a bit further back, and you're just going to have to defend against those shadows and eventually the chargers that start showing up once you open up some spawn points for them. But assuming you can hold out here for long enough and you get that scan all the way to 100%, you are done and you have completed alternate R4D2. And that's all there is to it. Alternate R4D2 is a really good example of a level where optional objectives were done pretty well. The main objective itself is already fairly challenging, but the modifiers put into play due to secondary and overload take it to the next level. While not all that long, overload puts that shadow air alarm into play, which forces you to double back to the start of the level and then slowly push through numerous shadows on your way to extraction. Meanwhile, secondary puts a soft time limit on your run since you need to finish the level before the infectious fog rises too high and becomes a major problem. Combine these both together and you get a truly enjoyable and challenging level. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that it was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. If you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you would like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my lovely community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which as always, I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, we're finally about to explore what I used to crown as the most difficult level in this entire game. So every single one of you better show up fully prepared for what's to come. And hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.